Here's our breaking news tonight. The Senate overwhelmingly passing a major prison and sentence reform bill. The vote 87-12. The bill known as the First Step Act.
First Step Act. The First Step Act, and it is a comprehensive piece of legislation that aims to address overcrowding in prisons while making the system fairer for nonviolent drug offenders.
The First Step Act, criminal justice reform, what does it all mean? What are some of the highlights from this new law, and how or why is this so important to our community?
Hey guys, thanks for joining Therapy Thursday. This one is special. All of my Therapy Thursdays are special, but this one is special to me because I worked in a prison, some of you know, for almost 8 years as a psychiatrist for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, also as a clinical director. And during some of my time there, I was also a member of the local union, and I felt it was important to bring on the national, I wanted to say our national president, but I'm no longer an employee there, but the national president for the Council Prison Locals, which represents 122 facilities for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, including, or in addition to that, Guaynabo, Puerto Rico as well. This is Mr. Eric Young.
Hi guys.
Thank you for being on Therapy Thursday.
Oh, glad to be here.
Listen, for people who look like me, who look like you, and probably who look like a lot of the folks who are watching this, at some point during this session, we're going to talk about the Criminal Reform Act, which includes some legislation and some bills that actually can close the gap or resolve or, how shall I say, correct some of the disparities that we have in the criminal justice system when it comes to minorities, African Americans, and also Latinos, right?
Yes, people that look like us.
Yes. So for the Bureau of Prisons, you've been a trainer, a national organizer, chief negotiator, lobbyist, strategist. Before you became, or before you acquired all of those roles, who was Eric Young before you got into the Bureau of Prisons? And the reason why I want you to tell this story is because so many young black men need to hear and understand that there's someone similar to them or like them who was able to defeat the odds, all of the odds, earn a good job, right, with benefits, and also kind of find a way that you can help other people and mentor other people. And now you're the national president for the local union for the Bureau of Prisons, and you've been a major part in supporting this criminal justice reform bill.
Yes.
So who is Eric Young?
Well, Eric Young was born and raised right here in Southwest Miami-Dade. I was actually raised in Perrine, Florida. I wasn't raised by my mother and my father. I was raised by a grandmother who was a school bus driver. She actually became a widow at the age of 39 after having 10 children. Her husband died from leukemia at the age of 51, after having served in World War II. Yeah, my grandmother did the best that she could on a bus driver's salary. Actually, I'm the eldest of her grandchildren. My mother was 15 years old when she had me. Obviously, my mother was too young to raise a child, and thus my grandmother stepped in and took me from my mom at her early age. My grandmother also raised my other brother, Corey, as well, with her children as if we were her own. So, yeah.
So you were about 21, 22 when you joined the Bureau?
Oh, well, actually, I was 22 years of age. I'm 47 now.
Gotcha.
And
so 25 years.
Yeah, I'm almost 25 years actually. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so how long, how many years were you, I'm sorry, did you come in as a correctional officer?
I came in as a correctional officer, and I'm still a correctional officer.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so when did you decide to get involved with the union?
Well, like I said, I wasn't no,
Angel.
model citizen, and when I came in with all those, rough around the edges, attitude, and still, I was very disgruntled that I got service connected out in the military. And the Bureau of Prisons had what they call paramilitary atmosphere that I wanted to be a part of, back of something like the military.
Right.
I was going to make the military my career. is because I felt the camaraderie in there was just amazing, that I wanted to be a part of something like that. And the Bureau offered that. But when I came there, I didn't have that same atmosphere environment where you had your supervisors literally trying to take care of you and mold you into becoming who you are.
So I'm reading something here. The Council of Prison Locals has fought for meaningful criminal justice and sentencing reform for the last 5 years that will reduce the number of inmates that are in federal prisons, reform the system that keeps certain types of low-level, non-violent offenders in prison longer, and put more resources into programming that has been proven to reduce recidivism rates. So the thing that comes to mind for me first is, number one, we have a lot of people in prisons who have committed low-level crimes like marijuana possession, drug trafficking marijuana, which now is legal in a lot of states, either for medical and or recreational usage. And also, there's no reform in the prison. I've worked there, I've seen it. There's no real reform. So people go to prison and they don't do anything significant to teach them job skills, trades, allow certain levels of education so that they, and I'm speaking on the federal prison, but so correct me if I'm wrong, do we do a good job at reforming inmates so that they can come out of prison and be a different type of citizen?
Well, I'm an advocate for our staff, and when I say an advocate, I'm a proponent to believe that the work that we do is better than most states. Let me just say this.
Okay.
We don't have any comparable organizations that operate at the time when I became the national president. Our population was up to 217,000 offenders, and we had 120 facilities during that time. Most of our workers are program staff, besides the correction officers. So they're supposed to facilitate in the program and following the mission of the Bureau of Prisons.
So programming as in reforming.
Let me give you a perfect example. Like you have teachers that actually is supposed to assist offenders with getting GED.
GED. I will say we did do that well. We had a really good educational program at FDC.
Right. And see, you worked at an administrative facility where most of the people were actually being tried for their offenses and held over. So you didn't really get an opportunity to see the full gamut of the other facilities that are designated facilities, like FCI Miami, where the staff actually have a Unicorn program that actually is our most successful reentry program that teach people an ethic of work. You have a lot of VTs, vocational trainers, who are actually teaching offenders in plumbing, electrical work, etc. So you at the detention center, you don't really get that full gamut.
I did see it when I went to FCI, and you're right. Yeah, yes, that's correct. They had Unicorn.
We do a good job, and I have to say this: the work that we do, knowing that there's no other correctional entity in America that actually compares with the level of work and responsibility that we do.
Right.
We have the lowest recidivism rate compared to any state system, and that is in the low 30s, while many of the state facilities are in the high 60 and 70 percentile range.
That is a great comparison to
make.
Okay.
So when you say, do our most valuable resource actually do a great job in spite of the circumstances, even though they're underfunded, minimum staffing, I think we do an outstanding job. And just imagine what we could do if we had the appropriate resources.
Okay, point taken. Thank you for clarifying. So we do a good job. We do an excellent job at reforming, you're saying, and providing skills, vocational skills, and teaching them job skills through Unicore.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I personally worked on because our Unicore factories, after the Congress eliminated what they call mandatory sourcing, meaning that all the federal agencies had to buy their products from our Unicore. But when the Congress felt like Unicore was taking small business jobs, they actually eliminated mandatory sourcing. So the organization, our most successful product to keep inmates from being idle, they actually started hemorrhaging monies out of their reserves to the point that they almost literally went out of business, trying to still compete with the private sector. But we have since revived that. Under the Obama administration, he brought in a new CEO, and we actually he instituted some things, and I worked closely with him to basically actually save our most successful reentry
That being
organization,
Unicorn.
that being Unicorn. And that's someone getting up every day to go to work, to operate as if they have a job, even though they're not getting paid the pennies of an orderly. They're getting paid some form of salary, and which is just the most important thing about it is to keeping the inmates from being idled in the prisons, and they're actually working in jobs that they basically could actually leave the prison to actually go find a job.
There's the First Step Act, and there's also the Second Chance Act.
Yes.
Can you talk in general about the Criminal Reform Act?
Well, the First Step Act, which passed today by overwhelming majority in the House.
Today is December 20th, 2018.
Yes, that passed today. And just 2 days ago, the Senate passed it by overwhelming majority as well in the Senate. The Senate bill is what had to go back to the House because the House passed the original First Step Act that didn't have all these protections that we currently have in here and now. The bills have to match in order for it to be signed by the president. The original bill actually speaks about leveling the playing field for crack and powder cocaine disparities. Also allowing first-time nonviolent offenders to be able to go and petition the courts to have their sentences reduced. So you will probably have about 3,000 to 4,000 people being able to go back and petition the court and get out immediately based on that to reduce their mandatory minimum prison sentences. There are a lot of things and mechanisms that were in the first bill which called for a risk assessment tool. I was speaking against the risk assessment tool is because the risk assessment tools that many other states and other entities use actually disenfranchise a lot of people that look like us, minorities, Hispanics, and blacks. That is something that also the ACLU, who I was sitting on panels, congressional panels, speaking about, they are more astute at that. But our risk assessment tool that we use in the Bureau of Prisons is our security and designations. If we don't get it right, people could actually lose their life. And we've seen that with Wyatt Bulger being sent to Hazleton. That is us not getting it right, and lives could hang in a balance as a result of a person not being designated to an appropriate facility and based on his individual specific needs.
So you're saying that there's some inmates who may have committed very serious crimes and they were being placed in low-level or mid-level prisons?
Yes, and what the first bill wanted to do was literally scrap our risk assessment tools, our security. I mean, this is a vetted program that we've had where we actually based inmates based on their point system and based on the seriousness of their offenses and prior history. We actually appropriately designate them to the facility in a security level that we believe that they to protect not only the security of the facility,
but other
also
inmates as well.
Other inmates as well, but also the communities.
Okay.
You know, if you don't put a person in an appropriate facility, like for example, they'll go over a fence in a minute.
Right.
You know, and we have some inmates that have nothing but 24 hours out of the day to think of a way to escape prison, and we've seen that most recently at some of our high security prisons. They're testing the system because of the lack of staff, because of the lack of resources. We've had attempted escape in United States Penitentiary in Lee, where the inmates were caught between the fence and prior to going over what we call a lethal fence in Atwater, the inmate scaled over the fence like Spider-Man without getting stung.
How do you do that?
That is the reason why we say that technology should improve security and should not replace security, which is us. They actually stripped all the gun towers where staff would have probably seen that inmate and would have probably encountered that inmate and stopped him from escaping. But without those gun towers actually there, the inmate was able to successfully even scale multiple fences and even go over the lethal fence.
Did he get out?
He got out, yes. Went over it in a matter of seconds.
So he was able to abscond that facility and leave?
Yes, and the Bureau of Prisons is so secretive that the management didn't even notify the local police, and the sheriff was pissed off about
Wow.
And that's some of the shenanigans that we address with.
Is he
members
still
of
at
Congress.
large?
No, he was actually eventually apprehended. Yes.
Okay. So some of the highlights of the bill, allowing lockers and a secure perimeter outside the secure perimeter for correctional officers to store their own personal firearms.
And that was done. I actually, we were able to get a bill named after Lieutenant Osvaldo Albarate and also Eric Williams shortly that following year. The Eric Williams bill is now signed into law, which provide OC pepper spray to officers. If someone would have had OC pepper spray, even Eric Williams, it's our belief, he probably could have survived the attack, but he didn't have anything but a radio and keys.
Was Eric Williams the officer in one of the units on the upper level, and they attacked him and
Yes.
threw him over the...
Well, he actually was jump kicked by an inmate down the stairs, and the inmate stabbed him with multiple weapons, even stumped and crushed his skull, and he stabbed him over 200 times and left him on the floor there. He was in there by himself with 120 of the worst of the worst offenders.
Which facility?
This was United States Penitentiary in Canaan. So before Mission Critical, we used to have 2 officers in the unit, and that goes back to Harley Lappin creating a Mission Critical system, saying that, one officer could run a unit with 120 offenders are the most dangerous of the dangerous. Now, understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And normally a neighborhood like Opelika is probably 1 or 2 goons that actually are making the neighborhood entirely unsafe. So imagine picking up all those people from all across America and even around the world. I'm talking about terrorists, murderers, narco drug dealers, and putting them all in one unit, and then saying one officer without sufficient protection could supervise these people. Those people don't stop their criminal proclivities just because they're incarcerated. So yeah, we have an awesome responsibility to supervise and rehabilitate those very people, many of whom that will get back out into society.
What's another essential piece to the bill that you think people should hear about or know about? There's a lot of pieces, a lot of information. So what else should people know about this bill?
It actually reforms a lot of the mandatory minimums that people, for first-time nonviolent offenders. For example, my first time experience in a mandatory minimum prison sentence was seeing my 14-year-old brother tried as an adult in the state of Florida and given a 10-year mandatory sentence. He went to an adult jail, went to an adult facility
at the age
of 14. And subsequent to him, many other of my brothers actually, while I was in the military, actually followed behind him in a state facility as well. Within my youngest brother as well also served a 10-year mandatory prison sentence as well.
So they were given mandatory minimum sentences. They had to serve this 10 years for these crimes they were accused of committing.
Yeah, and I'm not, like I said, it was, I'm not talking about that they didn't deserve any kind of punishment for their actions, but when you're raised in an environment that where you literally have to protect yourself, you got to remember this is during the time of the crack epidemic. You understand that my baby brothers were raised in Circle Plaza with their father. Circle Plaza was almost like considered equivalent to the Poke Beans, in the city. So
lots of violence.
A lot of violence, a lot of, and I'm not trying to say that they didn't.
And no community resources or support.
Exactly.
So in these types of, these parts of the city, besides the crime, there are no resources. There's nothing for the kids to do. There's no one there training them, teaching them, or nothing to occupy their time, so they're left to their own vices.
Exactly, and like my brother Corey was able to get a GED during his 10-year mandatory. But by this time, Jeb Bush comes in and literally ends programming in the state of Florida. So my other 2 brothers weren't able to obtain their GED behind the prison walls and fences. So
right,
you know,
because what they got rid of the GED program, or they made it so it was no longer mandatory.
they basically went into warehousing offenders,
right?
Literally saying that it doesn't serve any purpose.
Right. I remember something
yes.
a few years ago in the state prisons here in Florida where they reduced the funding for GED programming,
yes.
or something to the effect of it was no longer mandatory.
Right.
So of course the children who come from broken homes, no appreciation for many things because they didn't have anyone to teach them, they weren't choosing to engage in a GED program.
Exactly. And like, you know, talking about
which by the way, I'm sorry, but this is another conspiracy that they use. So we're not reformed, so that we don't acquire education, so that we don't improve, we don't get better, and they send these kids back out on the street.
And thus in return is the revolving door in and out of prison.
Us in prison.
Life. Exactly.
Yes.
So, in a perfect example, my youngest brother, you know, James, Maurice, he actually got out and he wanted a job so bad. I'm talking about a grown man that came and sat in front of his brother. He had a child before he went into prison as a teenager, and when he got out, he wanted to be able to take care of his son. That's all he wanted to do. And to know that he was sitting there crying, knowing that he wasn't able to find meaningful employment because he didn't have a GED, and he no one would hire him, not even give him housing as well. And I remember having to cut a check to give my brother, to say that, you know, whatever I could do for you, I'm going to try to do. And I tried to encourage him to get into a grown folks evening class to earn his GED. But it wasn't fast enough for him, and he got upset with me prior to him being shot and killed, that I wouldn't buy him a fake GED online. And for the 3 months prior to his death, he didn't speak to me, and you know, so that right there is something that that still haunts me today, because the day that he died, he did call me, and he wanted to speak to me, and I was on a conference call. I couldn't talk to him, and the next day I found out that my brother had been shot 10 times and killed, but he was trying to basically I mean, obviously what happens when you don't conform to society? I mean, you walking around with a scarlet letter on your chest. They tell you that you pay your debt to society while you're incarcerated, and that once you do that, you get out, that you could start over. Well, life wasn't able to start over for him.
Right, yeah.
And
no tools to start over.
Absolutely. He and my two youngest brothers are no longer amongst the living. You know, they're in the grave. My two youngest brothers, and my only surviving brother, Corey, the one that was tried at the age of 14, he is still alive, but he has cancer. You know, so, you know, but I called him today and told him what was passed. Hopefully that could give other people the opportunity to be able to live. So this is very critical for a time for America. This is America's do-over for failed policies, because the crack epidemic predominantly affected people that look like us. And now we have the President of the United States declaring war on opioid epidemic that is now not affecting people like us. And now, all of a sudden now, they want to pour billions of dollars into resources, is because it's affecting people that don't look like us.
Right.
So, yeah, now, unfortunately, things have to come full circle, but this is America's first opportunity to be able to try to make right some of what it has done wrong. To be incarcerating, as I stated, 2 million people at the tune of $80 billion a year and increasing. You got to find out that there's other better ways to be able to do some things differently. And some states do have it right. Texas is one of the places that have it right, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons now has the ability to be able to model some of its programs behind the state of Texas.
What's different about Texas? Because I actually thought Texas had worse prison sentences.
Well, they do for violent crime.
Okay.
Texas was known to be very hard on individuals for crime, but when they start realizing how much it costs to build a new prison, which was coming to the tune of near $1 billion to build a facility, they knew that they couldn't, their state budget couldn't continue to fund that, so they started.
So they found
ways to be able to find a unique way to offer reentry courts that actually allow judges to address those people who are repeat offenders, be able to give them other opportunities other than just throwing them away and locking them up. And in the federal system, they don't get that opportunity because you get a mandatory minimum prison sentence, a lot of prosecutorial abuse of discretion. This new law here will return much of that discretion back to the judges, which is what they call a safety valve that is in that bill.
I saw that, yeah.
So that is one of the things that we wanted, and that is the true population control for the Council of Prison Locals, is to have judges say whether or not a person who's a nonviolent offender should go serve a mandatory minimum, or he could literally reduce it.
So I started to say explain the safety valve, but that's just what you just explained now, right?
Yes.
That the judge is in control over how much time someone who's not a violent offender receives for a nonviolent crime, basically.
Yeah, the judge could look at the record as a whole and determine whether or not a person needs to serve a mandatory minimum, or he could send a person to a drug rehab program. And that's the way the system should have worked. But the way that the system was set up, because it affected predominantly people looking like us, they just locked them away.
So the federal system we're referring to now, right? The federal system did not provide provisions for people to be redirected to other avenues of care, or such as like the drug reform, or sending them for drug treatment, or even is mental health care included?
That's
for the federal system?
I truly believe that hopefully, and those are additional provisions that Barack Obama administration was getting to, which is dealing with a lot of the mental health.
Right.
We got a lot of mental health issues of offenders in our system.
Right.
Many people who have dyslexia, dropped out of school, or other mental health issues that are diagnosed, and they are actually incarcerated for offenses and not given a proper mental health treatment.
Right. Jails are our new community mental health centers,
yes.
If you guys didn't know it.
And many state and local facilities, when they actually incarcerate people, they just let them out on the street, to basically avoid giving those people care. But these offenders become a very serious issue for the staff inside. I just think the Bureau of Prisons had an ass backwards system, where you could get incarcerated for a mandatory minimum. You could get Pell Grants to go to college while you're incarcerated. You could go to VT training while you're incarcerated. You could get GED while incarcerated. But all these programs were not being offered in the regular high schools in the urban areas and things like that. So I thought that was an ass backwards system, that we could pour tens of thousands of dollars into making sure offenders get rehabilitated behind prison walls and fences, even offer the drug programs, and some mental health treatment. But it's a Band-Aid approach. Behind the prison walls and fences, you could get all this assistance, but how come you can't do that before a person is incarcerated?
Right. And we'll end on this. Our society is one that's reactive and not proactive, and that's with a lot of things. The opioid epidemic that you mentioned, what we're doing now is a reactive thing. We haven't been able to proactively create programs and prevent these types of things from occurring, which is what you just described with the prison system. So, and in our society, basically, why aren't we providing these programs and also providing the fundings for schooling, substance abuse programs, and mental health treatment? Why does it have to come after the person has broken the law?
Right. And thus, in terms, coined the term First Step Act. This is the beginning of, I'm sure, what's more to come after the vetting to see whether or not what they actually are implementing is working. And if it's working, I'm sure other initiatives, ban the box, other initiatives that many of the legislators will actually follow.
We have reviewed a lot of information, Mr. Young. I am honored that you came and spoke with me, and you explained all these things, and you explained it in such basic terms for everyone to understand who's watching. I hope that you all share this information with, your friends and family, because this is important information to know about, especially with the passing of this bill, all of the changes and the things that happen in our federal prisons. Is there anything that you would like to add?
As I indicated before, this is a do-over for America. I believe that the policies that was implemented primarily that started from Nixon to Reagan to Bush to Clinton, and Clinton literally sealed the deal when he signed that crime bill, literally sent the Bureau of Prisons population into what it is today. Went from 55,000 to over 200,000 incarcerated since Clinton's term in office. This is an important point for America to decide whether or not we're just going to continue to incarcerate people instead of giving people what they actually need.
Right.
As you mentioned, the mental health treatment. How come they can't get mental health treatment before they get incarcerated? Vocational training. That used to be in school, in my high school, and I don't see that anymore in my kids' high school. They don't even offer you to get your electrician license, your plumber's license. As everybody ain't going to college in essence.
Right.
But to know that they are offering these programs and Pell Grants for people to get degrees behind prison walls and fences, it's just unconscionable. And I think that we need to revisit whether or not we're doing the right thing. How come we can't give these resources to people prior to their being incarcerated? So I think this is an important first step.
Thank you. Thank you for watching, guys. See you next Therapy Thursday.